Hello, here we are with the next session. And so I'm going to introduce you one of my collaborators, Andrea Pozzi, who is doing his PhD thesis on creative and gastronomy tourism, an interesting but also difficult topic. Please, Andrea from University of Bergamo, start with your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Roberta. I'm going to replace one presentation that unfortunately the presenter is not among us today. Thank you, Roberta. My presentation deals with creativity, gastronomy, and tourism. This is my PhD proposal. This is in progress, so I would like to present you some preliminary findings and the methodology, also to have some opinions, suggestion, and also critics from you. What? Okay. So I will start with a brief introduction, and then I will show you the three main questions that I would like to answer and that are linked with creativity and gastronomy tourism. So let's start with trying to define the main topics. What is creative tourism? I think that many of you have already heard about this. And according to Richard and Raymond, creative tourism is a source to add value and innovate the tourist experience. And the main important element is that creative tourism is something more related to the individual. I mean, it is something that produces something valuable for tourists and improve their knowledge through the contact with the suppliers of tourist service. This is more a demand side process. Gastronomy, as you know, appeal to a wide range of travelers and then often being presented as example of creative tourism. So the main aim of my thesis is to define the linkages between these two tourism practices and try to create a model for a creative approach to gastronomy tourism. Let's start with the first research question. I started with a literature review to find linkages between creative and gastronomy tourism. And what I found, I start with defining creativity because creativity is something ubiquitous that not only refers to tourism activities, but also to other practices. And the main three elements are that creativity involves the ability to produce something new and meaningful. There are different types of creativity, from the genius of individuals and the creativity of everyday life. And creativity can be also expressed in different forms: the creative person, the creative product, the creative process, and the creative environment. But what about creativity in tourism and creative tourism? As I said before, creativity in tourism is something more related to the production of something valuable and, for example, can refers to new concept, as we will see afterwards, of experiences provided by the suppliers, while creative tourism is something more related to the individual because it implies that the use of tangible, intangible cultural resources, and the tourists are active agents and participants in the process of experience development. So creative tourism requires an active involvement, not only of the tourist, but also the destination itself. Let's see what are the interlinkages between creative and gastronomy tourism. I found in my research several examples of creativity that has been applied to gastronomy tourism. For example, new culinary options such as, for example, the Novo Andean cuisine, where the chefs creatively redefine the traditional foods and create new and novel options for tourists. Another example, and most popular, are the cooking classes. This is a form of creative tourism because travelers are involved in the process of creation. In this case, I found an interesting example of from Thailand, where the National Tourism Agency create a marketing campaign where cooking classes are one of the main elements of the creative tourism destination, which is Thailand. But creativity can also be expressed in tourism and gastronomy tourism in different ways. I also provide an example of the foodscapes. I mean, a place that is attractive for its culinary life for travelers. Let's move on with the question number 2. So, the main aim is to investigate what creative tourists want in terms of gastronomic experiences. We carried out a Kawi survey on a representative sample of Italian travelers. These are all information about the methodology, but I would like to focus more on the results because I try to compare two different groups, all Italian travelers and those who define themselves creative tourists. In my research, I opted for self-assessment. I mean that only who state creative tourists are in this group, because also starting from the previous literature, it is very difficult to define creative tourists in other terms, for example, with the participation of specific tourism activities. In this case, you can see the participation rate of creative tourists and all respondents in different activities. And what emerged is one thing very interesting, that there are not very significant differences between creative tourists and all respondents. This what I mean, that maybe instead of calling this group creative tourists, it is more important to focus on creating creative opportunities for travelers using gastronomy. Of course, there may be a group of travelers that are motivated or more engaged with creativity, and they are more attracted to the offerings that give them the opportunity to develop their knowledge and also to do something practical. But creativity in gastronomy tourism also deals with new culinary options offered, for example, by chefs that creativity recreate traditional recipes. This kind of offerings can be also labeled as passive offering because tourists only enjoy recipes and food and do not do something practical. In this sense, starting from the results, I think that it is important to create different opportunities in all this kind of activities and experiences. But of course, these are only preliminary results. I need to deepen the knowledge of all the data and try to better refine the results. We are moving to the third and final question, and this is linked with the creative approach to gastronomy tourism. I would like to create a model for a creative approach to gastronomy tourism, starting from my findings and also starting from the literature. In this sense, I found very interesting to adopt different perspectives. I mean, a perspective from the consumer side, a perspective from the supply side, and a perspective from the destination. I would like to share with you my preliminary considerations, so also to have your opinion. As concerned implication for consumers, I think that there are different types of experiences that can be gained from consuming gastronomy analysis. As you know, this kind of activities can be more consumptive, such as dining at restaurants, more cultural, for example, visiting to wineries, more engaging, such as festivals, and creative tourists want to make their holiday more meaningful through a more stable relationship with locals. So it will be also important to give them this opportunity and also try to add creativity in each of the different types of experiences as to fulfill all the needs of the tourists. As concerned producers, as you know, in gastronomy or food tourism, there are a large variety of producers that cater for the gastronomic need of tourists. Not only food producers, but also retailers, hotels, restaurants, attraction, farmers market, festivals. So, if we would like to develop a creative approach to gastronomy tourism, I think that it is very important to include also local community in the process of creation. This element is also very important in gastronomy tourism, but in creative tourism, it will be very, very important because, as I said before, to develop creativity, travelers need a closer contact with the local people and try to improve their knowledge through this very useful contact. As concerns destination, as we know, the development of gastronomy tourism depends on the collaboration among private and public actors, not only within one sector, for example, food or only tourism, but also across the tourism and the food sector. My apologies, my phone is ringing now, I muted. But in gastronomy, in creative tourism, this kind of collaboration, it is very, very important, and it should be aimed at increasing the vibrancy and the attractivities of the place, not just for tourists, but also for people living in these places, because it is very important to create what I mentioned in one of my previous slides, the so-called foodscape, creative foodscape, because we have to create a place where creativity and gastronomy can be combined, and this combination create new and novel options for travelers. That's fine. Thank you for your attention, and I hope that in one of my next presentation I will be able to give you more and more consistent results.
Thank you, Andrea. Ronaldo, want to know something more about the methodology? How many tourists were interviewed by group?
Okay, Ronaldo, I skipped this slide, but we interview 100, more than 1,000. Oh, I'm frozen. Can you hear me?
Yes, no, it is okay. Eric had a problem with his
Okay.
PC, so you can go on. Thank you.
That's fine. So we interview 1,000 Italian travelers. This is a representative sample of Italian travelers. And the number of creative tourists is about 300.
Okay. Melanie, do you think gastronomic tourism and the foodscapes can be a social and or economic opportunity for internal areas in Italy?
I think yes, because as concerned the foodscapes, in my PhD thesis, I focus more on something that has been created purposely by locals, but also the foodscapes in terms of landscapes where you can see the gastronomic culture of the territory is important, and will be an opportunity for the development of internal areas of Italy.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that I answered to this question.
Yes, and the theme of internal areas and little cities is more and more important in COVID age. And so we have less people in the big cities, and it's necessary now to drive the people to little the people want and are more quiet if they are in little cities, and theme of smart working that is growing up more and more with the COVID age. It's another important topic because we can see in the future how this will impact on tourism and what will happen. There are some regions in Italy that are starting some actions trying to catch the people that want to do smart working in different areas, and so escape from bigger cities, for example, Milan, and going we have a growing interest in the south of Italy, for example, and Tuscany, that is another very green region, a very interesting region for gastronomy tourism, is doing some actions relating to this, trying to give an incentive with a long stay in the hotels, and where you can find good connections for the office and so on. And this is something that could be interesting to have to see in the future what will happen about this. And so perhaps some situation related to food tourism, we can imagine something for this. And so if there is some other questions, or I can ask you, Andrea, to better explain something related to creative tourism and how it is linked to food.
Yes, of course. So I also forgot to say something on this during my presentation. according to the literature, creativity can be a background activity or a focal activity in tourism and also in gastronomy tourism. When it is a background activity, for example, there's no active involvement on the part of travelers, but in this case, these suppliers try to creatively create something new about the gastronomy. As I mentioned the example of Novo Andean cuisine, but there are many other examples all over the world. And also creativity can be a focal activity. It is a focal activity in tourism when travelers are active involved. Such happens in cooking class. I think that some of you may think that creative tourism and experiential tourism are the same things, but it is not properly correct, because experiential tourism is more a supply-led process. I mean that suppliers purposely create a new engaging experiences, while in creative tourism, travelers create the experience or co-create the experience through the contact of the suppliers. I don't know if I'm aware that this is something complicated, but I try to explain the differences. So I don't know if someone else has other questions.
Okay, we are quite at the end, so I think that we can close the session, and I remind you to click on the invitation you have received by email to attend the next one. Bye.
Okay.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Roberta.